Bigger, sorry, I'm trying.
Can you say that again?
Okay, I'm going to say that again. So I'm going to read the verse, and I'm going to comment on the verse. The king of the south shall be strong. The first king of Egypt, Ptolemy the first, was a strong king. And then it says, one of his princes. Now the prince that it's speaking about says, in the latter part of the verse, it says the prince shall be stronger than the king of the south. That's what that verse is saying. The prince is going to be stronger than the king of the south. And the prince that it's talking about is actually Seleucus the first, which was that Seleucus of one of the generals of Alexander. And the history of that is that he was ruling over Babylon. He flees from Babylon in the conflict and he runs to Egypt. When he's in Egypt, he becomes an officer in the army of Ptolemy, goes back to fight in the Babylonian conqueror, takes over his territory again, and regains the title of King of the North. Does that make sense? And he becomes stronger. And part of that strongness is actually the fact that he owns a lot more territory. He actually goes right up into Egypt, into India, and he owns a vast amount of territory, while probably only really owns Egypt. That's verse 5. Verse 6. I'll give you the dates for verse 6. Verse 6 is from 252 to 246. And it's dealing with a wedding. It's the wedding of the daughter of the king of the south with the king of the north. So the king of the south, his daughter, he gets his daughter married to the king of the north. That's the history behind this. That's what this verse is dealing with. Does that make sense? Okay. The reason for this marriage is because of the warfare that's occurring between Egypt and the Syrian Empire. That warfare that's going on continues and continues. And they come to a truce and they say, as they did in those days, let's make a truce by having a marriage. So they have this marriage between the daughter of the king of the south and the king of the north. Sorry? A truce, a peace. Let's have peace. Now there are 4 major wars between the king of the north and the king of the south. They're called the Syrian Wars. And you can find them in history books. There's 4 wars, 1, 2, 3 and 4. This event here occurs after, and you can find it in history books, it's after the Second Syrian War. There are a number of major engagements between the King of the South, and this occurs after the Syrian War. There was the first Syrian War, then the second, and they said, we've had enough of fighting, so let's join together and have a truce. But this truce doesn't hold. So let's just quickly skip through these verses. This verse here, it says at the end of the years, and this is the end of the Syrian war years, it says they, the king of the north and the king of the south, shall join themselves together. So they join themselves together by coming into this alliance, this agreement. The rest of the verse says, for the king's daughter of the south, the daughter of the king of the south, shall come to the king of the north. So the daughter of the king of the south comes to the king of the north, exactly what the verse says, and they have to make an agreement or a wedding. This wedding occurs in 252 BC. Then it says this, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but he shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So the rest of this verse is dealing with the aftermath of this wedding. The problem with this wedding was that the king of the north was already married. Okay, he'd already got a wife, and now he's getting a second wife, who was the daughter of the king of the south. And part of the agreement was this. Do you understand why these nations would join together and through marriage? The reason is that their prodigy or their offspring would then be of a mixed race. And if they're mixed race, they don't know who their enemies are and who their friends are. So that's the reason, that's the reasoning of having these marriages between nations. So the children don't know who the enemies and who the friends are. So the warfare stops between the nations. Yeah, that's why they do that. That's why Solomon marries Pharaoh's daughter. So they come into alliance, so that when they have their children, the children won't be inclined to basically make war with their grandparents. So that's why that's the idea of it. So part of the agreement is that the king of the north has to get rid of his existing wife, so that his new wife becomes the number one wife. Okay, that's the reason behind this thing. The problem is that it doesn't work out, and the old wife actually has the new wife, his daughter, killed, and she has her killed, and then she has her husband killed. So his wife kills him and kills the daughter. That's what that history is explaining in verse 6. It's the history of the wedding and then the deposing of this king's wife, and then she taking revenge upon this king and upon his new wife and killing both of them. So that's the background of that verse. So just reading through the details of it, it says, but she shall not retain the power of the arm. That means she shall not retain her political stature. And the reason she doesn't is for two reasons. Is simply this. When the king of the north marries her, after a while he gets rid of his first wife, then he gets his first wife back, and he makes his first wife the important one, and she gets deposed to some secondary position. So it says here that she shall not retain the arm or her power as being number one queen. That's what that part of the verse says. Then it says that she shall be given up, that means she shall be killed, and they that brought her, all of her attendants were all killed as well. And then it says, he that was begat of her, or he that was begotten, all of her children are killed as well. And then the last part of the verse says, he that strengthened her in these times. And that either strengthened her was the one who married her. So it says, he that married her in these times, he shall not stand either. He shall be given up. And that's when his wife kills him. So that's the end of this history here. That this king, essentially, his wife actually kills the daughter of the king of the south. And when we get into the next verse, verse 7, this is the stage for the next war. Because of this murder of this daughter, the king of the south wants to take revenge upon the king of the north. And we'll deal with that very quickly now. So read verse 7.
So do you have the names of the daughter?
Okay, I've got all the names. So in this history, the king of the south is Antiochus the second, and the king of the north is Ptolemy the second. And the daughter is called the niece. And the queen of the king of the north is Laodice the first. They're all names. Sorry? Okay, this time period here is 252 to 246. So we've moved on a number of years. Seleucus the first Sorry, yeah, I got those the wrong way around. Thank you. King of the north and King of the south. We had Seleucus here, yeah? Someone's asked me about Seleucus. What happened to Seleucus the first? Okay. Remember he won the battle in 281 BC? Remember that? He actually dies the same year. So he dies in 281 BC. But his children come after him. What I'm going to do is, as we go through these verses, I'm going to tell you the king number. So he's number 1, he's the first king. And Ptolemy, the first, is number 1, is the king of the south, is the king of the north. Does that make sense? Okay? When you get to this history here of the wedding, we're dealing with Antiochus II. He was the 3rd king. And Ptolemy II is the 2nd king. So by the time we come to the history, Seleucus is off the stage, his son is off the stage, and now we're dealing with the grandson of Seleucus III. And his name is Antiochus II.
Well, this was all verse 7.
This is all verse, so this is verse 6. Someone's asking about verse 6.
What's the where it says King of the North, down the bottom there, about the 4th
There?
one, up the part, yeah. What's that say?
Laodice, L-A-O-D-I-C-E. She's the name, that's the name of the queen of the king of the north, the one who kills her husband and kills his second wife. The queen's name was Laodice the first. Okay, Seleucus, someone asked me, well, if we're saying that Antiochus is the king of the north, what happened to Seleucus? And what's happened is we've jumped through history now quite a bit. Seleucus the first was the king of the north, and he dies in 281 BC. So I've got king of the north, 281 BC, who dies then. And Ptolemy the first, who's king of the south. So I'm going to start labelling the numbers of the kings. So he's king number 1, and he's king number 1. So the king of the north, king of the south. When you get to verse 6, the wedding, the king for the king of the north is the 3rd king, and the king for the king of the south is the 2nd king. So does that make sense? So we're going to jump through history. We don't go to every single king. We're skipping kings.
Parminder, just to let you know, it's 5 minutes, 11 to 2.
Sorry?
It's 5 to 2.
5 to 2, yeah. We're going to stop now. Let me just check. So I'm going to try and get through these verses as quick as I can. Let's quickly, okay, in about 2 minutes, let's go through verse 7 and verse 8. We're going to go through verse 7 and verse 8 quickly. So I'm going to give the timing for verse 7 and verse 8. This is 246 to 245 BC.
So 7 and 8 together.
It's right, 7 and 8. We'll put 7 and 8 together. Okay? And this is the time period for this, is the 3rd Syrian War. This is the 3rd Syrian War. And the kings who are ruling now is, for the king of the north, it's Seleucus the second. And for the king of the south, it's Ptolemy the 3rd.